Hi, Ken Rohla from freshandalive.com. I'm here again in my backyard to answer the many questions we get by email and phone. And I'm having actually one of my morning tonics as I speak. This is one of the things I do every morning. I throw in a bunch of superfoods and fermented brew that I make, and a few supplements like probiotics and enzymes and vitamins and minerals. Just as an insurance policy, really, and to keep myself healthy. I know that there are certain people out particularly in the raw food community, that have the belief that you don't need to take supplements, that you should be able to get everything from your food, and that's correct. You should be able to get everything from your food, but unfortunately these days, even with organic food, you can't. If you test your own food, you don't have to take my word for it. You can get a device called a Brix meter, B-R-I-X, and you can check the produce you're getting from your own sources and see whether or not the nutrient levels are where they should be in those foods. And quite honestly, most of the Brix charts that I've seen really aren't where they should be to begin with. It's kind of like a lot of the norms for in the medical system for the human body. A lot of those norms are based on people being sick because we've forgotten what it is to have true health. So at any rate, I differ with the people whose opinion is that you can get it all from your food. If you're growing your own food, oh yes you can. But you got to be growing your own food, and you got to know how to grow your food nutrient dense, and also herbs and things. Because even if you're growing your own food, from time to time, particularly in our world with nuclear fallout coming down on our food and water supplies, with geoengineering pollutants coming down on us, and we're breathing this stuff in, with genetically engineered microbes being sprayed on us. And this is not conspiracy theory. You can test your body. This is what I've been doing for years, and I saw this 10, 15 years ago showing up in my clients. So I know for a fact this stuff is coming down on us. But you can test using a device called a QXCI SCIO. That's QXCI SCIO. Or the QXCI Indigo. It's the newer version of that machine. Those devices can identify biowarfare agents, heavy metals and toxins, and all kinds of things in the body. So it's not FDA approved as a diagnostic device, so nobody who's using those machines will pretend to be diagnosing. But in truth, those machines can identify these kinds of toxins in the body. So at any rate, you really do need to take some supplements. Even if you're growing your own nutrient-dense food and making your own superfoods, you still need to take some supplements to pull these things like radioactive elements out of the body, and particularly, working on the thyroid and the glands, healing the glands, because those are under bombardment all the time. And also, these metals and sometimes microbes get deposited into the brain, and so there are supplements like zeolites that take those out specifically. So every morning I just have my insurance policy with my little detox tonic, as I call it. I give those recipes out in my workshops, and I'll have information products with the details on those. So please don't call and email asking for the recipes, because my staff don't have time to answer those questions. But we will have that information coming out. And if you come to one of my live events, one of my workshops, I do give that information out. I have a 375-page reference manual that I only give out at workshops. So anyway, in my experience in testing people, you do need to get these nutrients into the body in other forms than just your diet or just the food you're eating, especially if you're eating from the stores. If you're not growing some of your own food or fermenting some of your own superfoods, then you definitely need to be taking some supplements or making your own supplements, okay? So anyway, to that end, here's a little tidbit that will help with that on getting nutrient-dense food. Somebody writes and asks, in a video of you on YouTube, you mentioned a handout on sprouting instructions. Where can I get the handout, and do you have any other tips for sprouting? Yes, you can get the handout if you go to downloads.freshandalive.com. You can download my sprouting instructions and tips. That's by far not at all comprehensive. I give out a lot of details on sprouting in my workshops and some of my videos, and also I will have a sprouting DVD coming out in the coming months, so look for that. If you get on my email list, you can be notified when any of my new products or services come out. If you can just go to newsletter.freshandalive.com and you can sign up for the newsletter there, or just go to freshandalive.com. So on sprouting, along with downloading those instructions, because those instructions are just very basic, let me give you a few tips on sprouting that I do that will blow the doors off of anything that I've seen anywhere else, okay? Because pretty much you go online, you look at YouTube videos on sprouting, and it's pretty much the same thing. Soak your seeds for X amount of time, and then stick them in a jar with a screen on it, or spread them in a tray of dirt or whatever. And yeah, that works, but some of those methods are just a real pain in the butt and a lot of work. I'm kind of lazy, so I like doing things the simple way, but I also like doing things where I get a lot better nutrition. So here's what I do when I grow sprouts, okay? There are two ways that I grow sprouts. One is growing in my kitchen without soil. Those sprouts are really quick and simple to do. Anybody can do it. Doesn't matter if you live in an apartment or a house or whatever. And it's really, really simple. I just take a glass Pyrex bowl with a rubber lid on it, or a plastic lid, which you can get at stores like Walmart or Target. I just get these Pyrex bowls, about maybe 6-7 inches across, and I'll take mung bean, lentils, adzuki beans, fenugreek was one of my favorites. Whatever your favorite sprouting seeds are, or legumes, take them, and I just soak them overnight in water. And I say overnight, about 8 hours. I've seen sprouting charts where it has whole lists of different sprouts, and that, you got to soak this one X number of hours and that one X number of hours, and it's all nonsense. If you had to be that precise in nature, nothing would ever grow. So just soak the doggone things for about 8 hours. Where you run into trouble is if you soak them too long, because then they'll start fermenting, and then if you take them and plant them, you're going to get mold and mildew. So the trick is not to leave them soaking too long. 8 hours is all you need. If you go much beyond that, you start seeing bubbling and stuff in your water, they're starting to ferment. So that's one of the major tricks to sprouting, is just simply not soaking your seeds too long, okay? So once you've got them soaked, then I just leave them in the bowl. I rinse them, and I don't use any sieve or any special equipment. I just take the lid. Let me put this down so I can show you. I just take the bowl, and I take the lid, and I tilt the lid. It's not sealed, but it's on top of the bowl, and there's just a slight crack in between the bowl and the lid, and I just take it and tilt it like that and pour the water out. And then I rinse them off, and I do it again, and that's it. Then I set them back down on the counter, and I let them sit with the lid still on, but maybe slightly moved over, so there's a little bit of an air gap so air can get in there. That'll help keep them from drying out, but at the same time they won't get all moldy or anything. You also have to start with good seed. If you start with seed that's already moldy, you're going to get mold no matter what. So I like to get my seeds from organicfruitsandnuts.com. That's Jaffe Brothers out in California. They consistently have good mold-free seeds and sprouting legumes because they sell a lot. They're not sitting around in silos for months accumulating mold spores, okay? When you see mold in these seeds, it's because companies that don't sell them that fast, they get them from companies where they're sitting in silos or sitting in storage for months and months. They don't move, and then they get moldy. And there's just no way around, you're going to get mold with those kinds of seeds. So organicfruitsandnuts.com. I also like handypantry.com. They sell good quality seeds and sprouting equipment and things that you won't get mold with. So start with a good seed, okay? And then soak them, like I said, about 8 hours. Some seeds don't even have to be soaked that long, but when they plump up and they get fat, you can rinse them off, and then let them stay in that bowl, and rinse them 2 or 3 times a day. 3 times is best. If you work a normal 9-to-5 job, then you want to rinse them before you go to work. When you get home, you want to rinse them, and before you go to bed, you want to rinse them. Keeping them rinsed off keeps the bacteria from forming on them that will create fermentation, which will make them go bad and create mold on your sprouts, okay? So keep them rinsed, and in another day or two, they're going to have little tails. As soon as they get a little tail coming out, don't let them get long. As soon as they get a little tail coming out, if you're going to plant them in soil, then you plant them in soil. Otherwise, you can rinse them off put them in the fridge, and then about once every day or two, once they're in the fridge, you can rinse them. They'll continue to grow in your fridge, but that's how you can have really quick, in like 2-3 days, you can have a huge bowl of sprouts, and you can mix them up. You know, I'm lazy. I don't have 5 bowls of 5 different sprouts in my fridge. I take 5 different sprouting seeds and I throw them into one bowl. I rinse them, I soak them all together, you know, and if those sprouting charts were correct, where you got to have them soaking all different times, that would never work, but it works. So, you know, simplify. Just throw them all together, you know, unless you want them separate to add different ones to your salads at different times, that's fine. But, you know, I don't have a lot of room in my fridge. My fridge is loaded with produce, and I don't want to have all these bowls stacking up in there. So I just throw them all together, okay? Now, if you're going to go beyond that, and if you want to sprout into greens, then you need to grow them in soil. And growing in soil is not complicated, particularly if you're growing in trays. If you're growing outdoors, depending on where you're at, like here in Florida in the summertime, it's virtually impossible to grow sprouts in the ground outdoors because it's so hot and humid here, and the latitude, the geographic latitude, makes it extremely difficult to grow most sprouts and vegetables outdoors in the summertime. There's a few that you can, but so it's just easier. One of the major tricks is grow indoors near a window or in a well-lit room. It doesn't have to be in direct sunlight, with air conditioning. Dry, cool air will radically reduce the odds of you getting mold and mildew in your sprouts, okay? So I have a screen-in porch. It's actually a windowed porch room that's got a lot of sunlight coming in there, but it's not direct sunlight on the sprouts, and it's air conditioned, and so there's plenty of light in there. You can grow right next to a window. It doesn't have to be in direct sunlight, but in air conditioning it's much, much easier. You're not going to have the humidity that causes mold and mildew to form. Once you've got a tray of soil, start, you know, when you're typically growing in trays of soil, you're going to start with some type of soil. Don't go digging soil up out of your yard. Even though if you have good soil, the problem with the soil from outdoors is it's full of microbes and things that and fungus spores that can cause mold on your sprouts. So if you're sprouting in trays, you want to buy soil, and you do not want to buy the junk from these big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's. Those soils are full of chemicals. Even if they're organic, even if they're labeled organic, they're still full of wetting agents and all kinds of chemistry that will create mold. Mold and fungi are nature's garbage collectors. They break down toxins into non-toxic elements. So if you've got chemicals in your soil, you're going to get mold because that's nature's way of getting rid of those toxins. So what kind of soil do you want to start with? You want to start with something like Fox Farms soils. There's a company called Fox Farms that has high quality, high ormus soils that does not have mold spores in it. If you start with that, you won't have a problem with mold if you do these things I'm telling you, okay? So start with Fox Farms. They've got one called Happy Frog. They've got one called Ocean Forest. I use both of those for sprouting in trays. So you've got a tray of soil. You're growing it in air conditioning, ideally indoors. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you don't plant your sprouts too densely. Those seeds or legumes, whatever it is you're planting on that soil, once you take them from the kitchen and they've got the little tails, you rinse them off and then you spread them out on the soil in your tray. And how much soil do you want? You know, fill your tray up with the soil. When these things grow, their roots are going to get all wrapped up in that shallow tray anyway, and they're not going to get they're going to get root bound. They're not going to uptake nutrients very well. And I'll tell you what to do about that in a moment. But fill your tray up with soil, spread your seeds across it, and if you plant them too densely, then what will happen when they start coming up and growing into greens, the stems of the plants are going to be so close together there's not going to be any air circulation in between them, and you're going to get mold. So you don't want to plant them too densely. So for a typical 16-inch by 10-inch tray, I would recommend starting out with just a cup of sprouting seeds, whether it's legumes or whatever, just 1 cup. A lot of recipes will tell you to use 2 cups or stuff like that. Start out with 1 cup. Spread them. They may look kind of spread thin, but just spread them out and get used to sprouting this way with just a cup or so. and you won't have these problems with mold because there'll be enough room in between the stems of the plants that air can get in there and it'll keep it from molding. Now you can also put a fan recirculating air around it, like a ceiling fan, or you can have a fan blowing directly on it. If you're going to have a fan blowing directly on it, just make it a very light breeze, and you're going to have to water it more frequently because that's going to dry out the soil. Now another trick to growing sprouts and not getting mold is not overwatering. When you've got these trays of soil, you want to have them in a larger box that can capture water. I go to places like Walmart, and actually Target and Staples has these big plastic boxes that are about the right size that'll fit a 16-inch tray in them, and I let that capture the water. Now I'm experienced and I'm used to sprouting, so I'll put those in the bottom of the box. But when you're not experienced with sprouting and you're not used to knowing exactly how much to water them with, put your tray on some rocks or sticks or something to elevate it up off the bottom of the box that the tray is sitting in, so that when you water them, the water can drain completely out of the trays. If your sprouts are sitting in water, you're going to get mold, okay? And you don't want the soil to go dry, but you don't want it to be sopping wet all the time. So honestly, at room temperature in a dry air-conditioned room, typically you only need to water them once every other day. Not every day, not 2-3 times a day, just every other day. That's a big place where people go wrong, is they water too frequently, okay? So you're keeping your sprouts spread thin, you don't water them too frequently, and when you first spread those seeds out, you put an empty tray on top to shade them, because the first couple of days they're going to need to be in the shade. And so by putting an empty tray on top, it'll shade them, and as those sprouts grow, they'll start pushing that tray up. When it gets to about 1 inch high, then you can pull that tray off and let the sprouts take off, okay? And if you do all those things, then you will get sprouts consistently every time without mold, nutrient dense. But here's a trick you can do to jack up the nutrients even farther. Because as I mentioned, when you're growing in trays, the roots get all root bound and they don't absorb nutrients very well, and they don't have enough time. They've only got about 10 days or so to absorb nutrients from the soil, and they just can't do that when they're all root bound. So what you do to compensate for that and get nutrient dense, high ormus sprouts is to foliar feed them. And so you can foliar feed them by getting a simple way to do it is just buy this product. It's called MyGrow Minerals. You can go to mygrowminerals.com. That's MYGROW minerals.com. They have a fantastic ormus mineral product that you can foliar feed your sprouts or any plants, and you'll radically increase the nutrient levels on this stuff. You know, Dr. Joseph Mercola is a neighbor and a friend of mine, and when he first started sprouting, he went down to Hippocrates Institute and he learned about sprouting, and he came back home and he was having problems sprouting. And so I told him about ormus, and I told him some products he could use to spray on that, on his sprouts to foliar feed them. And he did all these things I told him to, and bam, he got not just good sprouts, but he got really nutrient dense sprouts. And so then he went looking around and he turned me on to the MyGrow Minerals, and they're phenomenal. So that's a really simple thing you can do, and that's really it. You know, if you do those things and you're growing sprouts that way, you will get extremely nutrient dense sprouts. Now you can also take those sprouts outdoors and leave them out for a few hours during the day and let them green up if you want to, or if you've got a room where they can get some direct sunlight, that's great. But here in Florida where I'm at, squirrels and all kinds of critters get into our sprouts. So in the fall and the winter, when it's not too hot, I'll actually grow in a cage outdoors to get the maximum amount of sunlight. And of course, always growing in the ground under the sun and the moon you're always going to get optimal food. But for people that are living in high rises, or just for people who have the typical American lifestyle and they're too busy or they don't have the space, you can grow in trays by foliar feeding with these ormus elements, and you will get much better food than what you can buy in the health food stores typically. So anyway, those are my sprouting tips. You can download the sprout instructions and you know, take these instructions and play with them. And again, don't call or email me with questions on specifics of your situation, because my staff and I do not have time to answer those questions. But just play around with it as with anything and find your own truth with this stuff, okay? So, hope that helps with your sprouting. Enjoy, and until next time, I'll talk to you later.